This is Phoenix, Arizona, a sprawling metropolis of over 5 million people rising out of the brutal Sonoran Desert, where summer temperatures regularly hover between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. It is also my home. I have lived here most of my life, and still do. Phoenix sits in a basin surrounded by mountains, which have all become landmarks which I know by heart. They have always been there, in the background of my life. Steady, solid, unchanging. One of the most iconic of these landmarks is known as Camelback Mountain, which sits at the heart of the city. It gets its name from the way it resembles a camel lying down. Camelback Road is named after it. There is even a local radio station named after it. Camelback Mountain is quintessential Phoenix, and yet I realize that I know almost nothing about it. So, I decided to change that. Welcome to Camelback Mountain, my friends. It is about 5:30 in the evening, and this trail is very steep. It's short, but it is steep. You know, I've lived here my whole life, and I've never actually climbed to the top of Camelback Mountain. I've only ever done a really small part of this hike one time in my whole life. So I figured the best way to learn about a place is to actually get up close and personal with it and see it for myself. I can already see so much about the geology I've been learning about this area. We'll talk more about that as we go along. Yes, that right there. Now, the only reason I'm doing this hike right now in the middle of June, when it's so hot, is because I've built up quite a heat tolerance. I go trail running at least twice a week with my running group, and then usually once more during the week by myself. I go hiking all the time. So I've built up resistance to the heat and a pretty decent level of fitness. I also have more than enough water with me and electrolytes. But you do not want to do this hike unless you have a good enough level of fitness that you can handle it. People have to get rescued off of this mountain every year. You don't want to be one of those people, trust me. So Camelback Mountain has two very different sides to it, which are made of different kinds of rock. The area I'm walking through now is known as the Camel's Head Formation, and this formation is made of sedimentary rock, which is about 20 million years old. There is some debate as to the actual age of this rock. And then the other half, the hump of the camel, is made up of 1.2 billion year old igneous rock. Granite. So two very different halves of one mountain. Now this sedimentary rock that forms the Camel's Head portion of the mountain is made of these granite clasts, which are basically just chunks of rock that are embedded in this red iron oxide cement. And those granite clasts, those big chunks of darker rock that you can see in here, give us a very important clue as to how this formation got here and why it looks so distinct from the rest of the mountain. Here's a up-close example of these big chunks of granite embedded into this reddish cement. And notice how angular and jagged the edges of these rocks are. It's another important clue for how this formed. So in order to really understand the context in which this really strange landscape formed, we have to go back in time, way back, 20 million years to be specific, around the time when this sedimentary rock was starting to be deposited. The Basin and Range is one of the most distinctive landscapes on Earth. Hundreds of roughly parallel mountain ranges, all running north-south, separated by flat desert valleys. Seen from above, or on a relief map, it looks like a fleet of caterpillars marching north, a pattern geologists sometimes describe exactly that way. It stretches almost all of Nevada and reaches into Utah, Arizona, southeastern California, southern Oregon and Idaho, and down into northern Mexico. Phoenix sits near its southeastern edge. Every one of those ranges and valleys exists for a single reason. The crust here is being stretched. Most mountain belts on Earth are built by compression, where plates collide and crumple the crust upward, like the Himalayas or the Alps. The Basin and Range is the opposite. The crust is being pulled apart, thinned and torn, and the mountains are a byproduct of that stretching. Over the last roughly 20 million years, the region has stretched so much that it's now nearly twice its original width. Nevada is physically wider than it used to be. When you pull brittle crust apart, it can't stretch smoothly. It breaks, it fractures along faults, and the broken blocks tilt. Some blocks tip up along one edge to become a mountain range, known as a graben. The low side of each block drops down to become a valley, known as a horst. Repeat that pattern across an entire region, and you get the signature corrugated pattern. Range valley, for hundreds of miles. The mountains are essentially the upturned edges of tilted slabs, and the valleys are the gaps between them, steadily filling with the eroded debris washing off the ranges. Everything distinctive about Phoenix's setting comes from this. The isolated desert peaks, Camelback, the Phoenix Mountains, South Mountain, the Tempe Buttes, are bedrock ranges left standing as the crust pulled apart. I told you it was steep. Very slippery. That's why they have this handrail. So that up there is the hump of the camel, which is made of the much older rock. So if we look at the granite clasts that make up this part of the rock, these big chunks of granite embedded in this iron oxide cement, we actually learned that these little chunks of granite are made of the exact same kind of granite that makes up the hump of the camel. So it was during that period where the North American plate was being stretched out and extended that we have these fault blocks, these huge pieces of crust being lifted up. That the topography of the whole Phoenix area started to take shape, and these fault blocks would be lifted up and then tilted over time. Tilted at an angle. And the sides of these fault blocks would have very sharp edges. And so, over time with weathering and erosion, those edges would chip off and accumulate at the base of these fault blocks. Then fast forward a few million years and we have those pieces of the original granite broken up and cobbled together and cemented in that iron oxide dirt. So right here we can start to see some of the ancient billion-year-old granite, which is the bedrock that was lifted up and exposed during the Basin and Range formation. And you can see how different it looks from the area we were just in. It's much more rounded, much bigger pieces of rock. I love how even in this super dense, hard granite, we have life taking hold. This Palo Verde tree is just sending its roots into the rock, straight into the rock. Life finds a way. It always does. There's a view of the Phoenix Mountains right there. You got Piestewa Peak on the far left. More ancient fault blocks that have eroded away, filling the surrounding basin with sediment. Now, a detail that I can't stop thinking about is the fact that this granite that I'm standing on here is just over 1 billion years old. And yet right there, we have sedimentary rock, which is partly made of this exact same granite, which is only roughly 20 million years old. So that's a incredibly vast stretch of time. Now, these two rocks are touching each other, but there's no geological record of that gap of time between these two rocks. That's called an unconformity. It's a piece of missing geological record. Now, we actually do have a record of what that rock was, which we can find washed away in different parts of the state from erosion. Essentially, there used to be a massive mountain range standing right on top of where I am now that over millions of years got completely erased from the map. It's just, these rocks look so permanent. They look so solid, like they're never ever going to go anywhere. But you can literally see evidence that that's not true. Just look at how these bigger pieces of granite become smaller pieces of granite, which then become even smaller, which then become the dirt and the dust, which all get washed away and completely erased as if it was never there. The amount of changes that this area has gone through is just absolutely mind-numbing. It's really incomprehensible. The trunk of an old Palo Verde tree still stuck in the ground. Life finds a way, but it also eventually comes to an end, only to be replaced by something else, something different. in the exact same way that this whole mountain didn't exist if you go back far enough. Now it does exist, but before too long this mountain too will be erased. It's being erased right now. You can see all these chunks of granite falling down into this little ravine. That's the mountain slowly disintegrating from erosion. Nothing is permanent. Absolutely nothing is permanent. It just looks like it is. Growing under the lip of this piece of granite here, we find a little chunk of moss, which is the last thing you would expect to find in a brutal, hostile environment such as this. This is called a microclimate, where there's just enough shade for this moss to grow and just enough moisture in the dirt because it's shaded most of the day from the sun. This is really cool. So we've got a chunk right here of the sedimentary rock. See that? See the granite clast stuck in this iron oxide matrix? Notice that rock is the same as this rock. So this comes from ancient landslides that fell off the slopes of this massive fault block as it was eroding over time. It's the same exact process that you see happening right here, which formed Camelhead. That right there is Papago Park, where you've got the Phoenix Zoo and the Desert Botanical Garden. Those red buttes are made of the exact same formation as the Camel's Head. That broken up granite embedded in the red iron oxide cement. And you can even see how these blocks of stone are tilted. They look like they're diving into the earth or rising out of it, however you want to look at it. Also, fun fact, iron oxide is just rust, and it is the same reason that the planet Mars is red. Just to give you an idea of how hot it is, I just took my phone out to check the map, and it was almost too hot to touch my phone. I can feel it in my eyes. My eyeballs feel hot. It almost feels like I have a fever. I don't, but yeah, this heat is no joke. It will kill you so fast if you're not careful. This hike is just stunning. It's so beautiful. Look at this. I've lived here my whole life, just about, and I've never bothered to do this hike. I don't really even know why. I just kind of ignored it because it's so close. It's just right there. I guess you just don't appreciate sometimes the things that are closest to you. Well, I'm trying to change that. I'm starting to realize how fascinating the city I live in is and the geology of this place is, and how a lot of the time some of the most interesting places are literally in your backyard if you just take the time to learn about them. Also, just the fact that this is in the middle of the city. Literally, we're surrounded by neighborhoods on all sides. It took me like 15 minutes to drive here from my house. I mean, some people travel across the world to visit places like this because they just don't have anything like this where they live. But I have it in my backyard, and I never appreciated it. You know, I was talking to a really good friend of mine the other day about gratitude and how gratitude completely transformed her life and her experience of reality. How just deciding to notice the things that she already has in her life and really putting an effort to look for them, to look for things to be grateful for, even when she didn't feel like it, literally brought her out of a depression. And in a way, I guess I'm doing the same thing by exploring these places that I've kind of just ignored because they've always been here in the background, like wallpaper. It's there, but you don't really know it's there. This place is spectacular. It's mind-blowing. It's ancient. And it's my home. Whew. Very, very steep trail. Climbing to the top of an ancient fault block. A massive piece of Earth's crust that was lifted up at a time when the crust was being stretched and ripped apart. Also caused a lot of volcanism in the Phoenix area, which you can see on places like Shaw Butte or a mountain in Tempe. Just really getting a sense of the scale of the forces that our Earth is capable of, climbing to the top of this giant block of granite. Another interesting thing to know about this area is, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Phoenix is built in this big basin. Classic basin and range topography. And then the little mountain peaks, which are these ancient fault blocks, slowly erode over time, which fills the basin up with sediment. And then the Salt River, which flows through the middle of the city and is the reason that the city exists at all, carries more sediment with it from way farther upstream. So over millions of years, this basin, it's hot, I can't talk. Over millions of years, this basin fills up with sediment. And this sediment-filled basin is what holds Phoenix's groundwater supply, which is a huge part of the reason Phoenix is able to sustain itself and actually has more than enough water to go around, at least for right now. That could very well change soon. Look at that shadow. It's like a perfect pyramid shape. That's incredible. What a spectacular view. Can't get over that shadow. That's just incredible. Didn't know that that was going to happen. Yeah, Phoenix is truly a much more interesting place than it might seem at first glance, and I'm really starting to understand that. So thank you everybody so much for watching. and I hope I'll see you on the next one. Climbing down the mountain blind because I forgot a headlamp. But there's just enough ambient light that I can see what I'm doing, so I guess I'm not completely blind. Oh, it's always an adventure. You think I would have learned by now. Always bring a headlamp.